arts, and I work with the Fry Museum. I've actually given a few talks with Mary, and we usually start out with music when we give talks together. So I'm sorry we're not doing that. We'll have to wait for next time. And if I push continue. So there's so much to talk about with arts and the purpose of arts and how arts interacts with dementia. But I'm really going to focus on sort of, because we have limited time, I kind of want to focus on how things are going now with our isolation. Connectedness is so important for everybody, more important for people with dementia, their families, their loved ones, and then now even more important because of the COVID thing and how that sense of unconnectedness is really kind of hitting home to everybody. I certainly feel that pretty significantly. So I think if I can forward, there we go. This is a slide that I have in a lot of my presentations because I just love it. This is about 32,000 years ago. It's a cave painting, and it always makes me think of why were people 32,000 years ago spending time drawing on cave walls? I'm sure they were hungry, they needed to get food, they needed to be warm, but they spent their time doing this. And I think it really, really represents just a human need to be expressive, creative, imaginative. You know, there could be some spiritual aspects to something like this, but I think the expression of art is really a fundamental human need. And it's not just something that's like, oh, we tag on to improve happiness or trying to improve memory or behaviors. It's not a supplement to any medical thing. It's the base of who we are. And this is another kind of concept that I really like. This is from Levi Strauss, who is a sociologist, and this is actually from the 60s, but I really, really like his concepts of, he has non-motivated art and motivated art. So non-motivated is art in and of itself that's of worth to us. Motivated art is we're using art for some other end. But some of the words he has here is art is a basic human instinct for harmony, balance, and rhythm. It helps us experience the mysterious, whether that might be spiritual or religious, expression of imagination, and some symbolic functions that I think gets into culture and sociology and how do we interact with each other as humans. Next. And here's the motivated that he broke this down in. So communication, we're trying to tell something through an art form. Lots of times art can be much more effective in getting something across than writing or telling something. You show it. Art is entertainment, going to a show, going to a movie, just having nice things to look at, political aspects. And then there's art that can be therapeutic, art that's really meant to help a certain issue or process. And so art is a tool to get you to a certain other place. But I think this is really what I want to talk about, these non-motivated purposes, that we have an inherent need to connect with ourself, with others, our community, our spirituality. And art is really an essential part of how we can do that. This is another, this came out of a study a few years ago, but it just looked at how, and I kind of picked this specifically for today because of the connectedness in the middle and feeling unconnected at this time where we're isolated. There's an essential human need to feel connected. And in a dementia perspective, this study looked at we talk a lot about quality of life in dementia. And I think when we talk about that, we think of physical safety, being well cared for, whether it's like daily activities, getting dressed, getting bathed, getting fed. We think that that's a good quality of life, but there's so much more to what is quality. And this study really looked at happiness, and they kind of broke out happiness versus our traditional sense of quality of life. But I don't want to dwell too much on this, but this connectedness, relationships, of course, sense of place. Am I in do I feel at home? Whether, wherever that is, do I feel like I belong in this place? Feeling that you're well, and then some purpose in what you're doing, agency. And so I think art can really hit on all of these aspects, and they have this connectedness in the center. So it's not just being, well fed and sleeping well and that kind of thing for anybody, dementia or not. It's really this connectedness that really is a core aspect of happiness and well-being. And I think art is an essential part of that. It certainly is for me. Okay, forward. So social connectedness. I do want to touch on what we know in dementia research and looking at one's sort of social network and community within, if you do have dementia, your loved one has dementia, how this is important. And I think in the memory clinic, we really try to emphasize this, is that, the physical safety, medications, but exercise, eating well, and social connectedness, whatever that might mean for somebody. Everybody has their own kind of comfort level with how they connect with others, but it's really, really important. So lack of socialization, whatever that might look like, is actually, it's shown that that's actually a risk for dementia, not just, oh, dementia is creeping in and so you're getting more isolated, which does happen, but people that are more isolated have more cognitive issues. Socialization is linked to cognition. I guess I just said that. And then obviously there's much other issues with social isolation, whether related to cognitive loss or not. It's not good. It's not healthy, right? Exercise, depression, obesity are all linked to with more isolation, less connectedness. We can talk about this more in the Q&A. I just want to say, I think Mary Grace, her job is to really help some of this. I mean, she's the expert in this area. So if we're saying that art is important for our own well-being, our happiness, and our connectedness, first of all, I would ask, what does this mean to you? How do you enjoy the arts? Pre-COVID, what was happening? Were museums a part of your life? Music, ballet, theater, creating art, drawing, making anything, what did that mean to you? And I think everybody has their own kind of connections and with art. But I just want you to reflect on what does art mean to you, regardless of the COVID stuff, and how is that important in your life? And what's changed now? So this is the title of the talk. So we have a need for this connectedness. Art is part of that connectedness, but now we are artificially disconnected. And I think, within the dementia realm, there is, pre-COVID, there is a lot of forces that can lead to less outings, less experience of things, less community interactions. And I think we always need to be aware of that. But of course, it's much worse at this moment. So if we're socially isolated, sequestering in our home, how can we make up for some of those experiences, like going to a museum, which can be very, I always think of museums as sort of a very special, sacred place. It's hard to get a sacred place in a museum, that feeling from home. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I always find it special going into the museum space. So how can we experience art from home? Well, I would start out, and and I'm using art as in a very general term. I think it can be a lot of different things. What about poetry or reading together? That's something that certainly you can do alone, but I think reading to each other, sharing things is really a super connected way to do things. Um, like with my son is doing audiobooks, and so I'll listen to audiobooks with him, and I think we can be connected, but also we can be experiencing a piece of art together, and then share it. Making art. This is also experiencing art. What was making art for you previous to COVID? Drawings, watercolors. Talk a little bit more about that. And I wish I had a lot more time with tips about that. And we can, if there's questions, we can get into that in the Q&A. But this could be almost anything. It's just sort of being expressive, doing something, having a final product, and that's a product of it, a self-expression. Then you can keep and share. So watercolor, drawing, clay. I know the Fry Museum does a lot of these things. And a lot of those are just easy, simple things to do. I'll talk a little bit about that too. They're just easy to facilitate. What about dancing or movement? It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be sitting in your chair and dancing around a little bit, moving. That's an artistic form. It's also can be very connected if you have music going. I just want to make sure that I point out that there's so many different types of art. And again, I'm thinking of that more of like a self-expression. Dancing is a self-expression. And listening to music. So this is experiencing art. And I'm not quite sure how to, making art is of course experiencing art too, but you're expressing yourself more than listening to music, where you're taking things in and experiencing things. And this could be also watching movies, watching ballet, theater on a screen too. Again, I think it's much better in person, but it could be. And then I'll talk a little bit too about online museum visits. And I'm a bit new to this, trying to experience what this is like. We'll talk about that a bit. Okay, I did want to, I'll give a little, some comments of what I've seen and experiencing through some of the art groups at the Fry Museum. But I do want to mention, so this is one of my favorite poetry collections, is Dog Songs. I'm a big dog person. My dog's right here. Very short, simple poems, but very meaningful. And, to read out loud a poem to somebody is really a special thing. And at the Q&A, we can share poetry or what our favorite poems are. This is just a picture of blobs of watercolor. This is so simple. Bright colors mixed together and just plop down, but they're so vibrant and expressive. I think they're beautiful, but very, very easy to do. You just put like a cloth or, a plastic tablecloth on a table, watercolor paper, and a brush and a bunch of watercolors and water. I mean, it's quite easy to do. And it can be very beautiful, very expressive. I've been amazed with some of the watercolors that have been done at the Fry projects. Here's another watercolor. It's just, one color that's spread out. You can see how the water moved things around a bit. But I find it very expressive and beautiful. Here's a watercolor that was done with tape. The white lines are tape that was placed down, and then the spaces were colored with watercolor, and then the tape was removed. Very easy to do, but you get these interesting patterns, and then you can reflect on them, talk about them, and then share. Put them on your wall, give them to somebody, name them. Just kind of fun. There's a lot of stuff that can be done with tactile. You know, looking up this this talk, I found out that the Play-Doh scent is copyrighted, which is very strange. I think we all know what Play-Doh smells like, but very tactile. You can shape it, you play with it. It's just something that you can touch and feel. Also, some of the, do I have the next one? Modeling clay can be very fun to work with. Very easy to clean up. You can squish it back into a ball, or you can make things, and there's the drawing modeling clay. You just let it sit out and it hardens. But that's a different sensation of having that feeling in your hand. And then just drawing, scribbling, taking either crayons or colored pencils, a sheet of paper, and just doodling. This is actually by one of my favorite artists, Cy Twombly. This is a professional artist. I have no idea, this would be worth thousands of dollars. But it's just a simple, I think he's got a very special touch, but it's simple. It's really scribbling, but in a very expressive way. And I think the colors really add. And I think this is, you know, it reminds you of a child's painting, which can be absolutely beautiful. Kids' artwork is wonderful, but very simple to do. And then you can sit, share it, talk about it, do some more, easy. So that's some of the kind of making art things. And, you know, looking into museums, so many museums now have online tours. And maybe we can talk about if anybody's done virtual tours, you know, the Louvre, Museum of Modern Art, Van Gogh Museum, they all have these virtual tours. You can, it looks like a lot of them have where you can kind of roam around a room and move the camera from painting to painting and zoom in. I actually found that pretty disorienting. It was kind of weird, and I mean, you get a sense of the room, and maybe some rooms would be much, you know, like the Louvre, I would think would have a room that would be very unique and special. You'd want to see that. But looking just at the paintings and zooming in and out was interesting. Again, I really like to be physically in front of a painting, but until I can do that, I think this can be kind of interesting, and I would be interested to know if anybody's tried some of these things. So here's a link for the Musée d'Orsay Paris. And then I put here, this is a link to just this might have been actually out of Good Housekeeping, but it's just a link with, you know, famous museums that you could click on and go and visit that museum. You can see a piece of work, and then there's writing about it, so you could just look at it and talk about it, or if you want to get into more of the history and meaning and things like that. So you can go to a museum. Again, it's a bit weird, I think, but it's available, and it can be kind of a fun shared thing to do. Oh, this is the Good Housekeeping one. So this has a link. If you hit on the link, it'll show you, it'll bring up all these museums that you can just click on and tour. Okay. And then, so I'm not sure how we're doing time-wise. Here's some questions, and Mary, I don't know if we could leave these up, but, I think it would be great to hear from you, any thoughts, suggestion, other questions, or particularly if there's questions about what you can do at home with making things. I certainly would want to entertain that. But some general questions I have for you. What are you doing? what are you engaging in at home? Have you kind of figured stuff out, or were there things that you were doing beforehand that you're just continuing, or maybe doing more? Are you making things? Are you sharing art activities? Are you sharing them with people in your home, people that are coming to visit you, or are you doing anything online, even Facebook or video conferencing, sharing story, or, seeing a movie and then talking about it? How are you connecting with others? And then finally, yeah, what are your questions? I realized that the Fry Museum has I'm thinking of Carmen, one of our educators there, and how he's experimented with so many things. He has a lot of knowledge in what works well, what doesn't, what's easy, what's a little harder. What would be helpful for you to know what you could do at home and how to start things? So